Hi family, thanks for watching. We are getting to the bees late this year again. Not as bad as last year. This inspection took place over the 5th and 6th of October, and it is the middle of autumn for us. We really shouldn't leave the inspections this late in the year for a multitude of reasons. For one, the bees are settling down for winter. The girls have kicked out all of the drones. The queen has raised her winter daughters, and the hive will be super agitated with me popping my head in. Another reason is that the propolis the girls will use at this time of year is much thicker because they are sealing up their home in preparation for winter, and it is harder to remove. It also costs them a lot of resources to make. Plus, the honey is much thicker and harder to harvest. But it's got to be done, and this was the soonest we could get into the apiary. The biggest risk to us is that the queen excluders are still on the hives, and we can't leave those on any longer. Once it starts to get cold, the hive will start to move up to keep warm and can possibly leave the queen in the cold. That is a hard lesson that we had to learn last year. I'll discuss more about it in the yellow hive inspection section. Basically, we got fooled by the extreme heat and thought that we had more time to play with, and found out later that nope. So we're learning from mistakes that we've made before. The weather, though, this year has progressed a little more naturally, with maybe that little blip in May. During that inspection, we found that we had lost a couple of hives. So in this inspection, my focus was to go through each one to see how they've fared since July. Forest hive. So in typical fashion, I did this inspection over the span of several days. The order we go over these apiaries is not exactly the order that I inspected them in, but I will start with forest hive. Forest hive is a split from earlier this year. However, we ran out of frames with built-out comb and put empty frames on the edge and just smeared those with beeswax. I also saw quite quickly that forest hive was very small in population. I did see the queen, and she has brooded eggs. Upon opening this hive, however, it does not seem that a forest hive has built out at all, only up. Not very strong going into winter. Under normal circumstances, I would scrape off all the burr comb that I am seeing, but this hive's population is small. We have deep frames with built-out comb on them that were from Purple Hive, but unfortunately they've been infested with wax moths, and we basically need to scrape them clean again. The rest of our frames have gone to our other hives because this year we decided to switch back to 2 deep brood chambers. As a result, all of our extra built-out comb frames went to them, and now it's too late in the year. We don't want to weaken those hives either. Forest hive has space, but it doesn't have built-out comb, and because this hive is so small, we'll definitely be giving it 1-to-1 ratio syrup. Maybe later make some candy board for it and give it some pollen substitute. My husband says it'll be unlikely that they will build out more comb at this time of year, but hopefully these girls will pull through. Fingers crossed. When I finished the inspection for forest hive, I was pulling out the bottom board to clean it and look at it, and found a handful of hive beetles roaming around on the bottom board. As far as I know, all hives have hive beetles. They like to keep warm and put their eggs inside the comb. Strong hive usually keeps the population down, but a weak hive like forest is can easily be overrun. So the bottom board we were using was something somebody had donated to us that looks like the screen itself has started to sag, and so it touches the bottom board. The point of these bottom boards with the screen is that the mites and hive beetles and all the other pests, when they fall to the bottom, and they can't get back up into the hive essentially. With the screen touching the bottom, it kind of defeats its purpose. So I went and grabbed one of our bottom boards that we custom built. So they don't quite fit properly because the custom brood boxes that we made are thicker than your store-bought ones. However, these bottom boards are pretty well made, and they'll do a better job of keeping out the hive beetles. When I switched everything over, I also didn't pat the rest of the bees that were remaining on the old equipment because I was worried about knocking hive beetles or other pests back into the hive. So all I did was just lean the board and the other equipment against the front entrance, and the bees will find their own way back into the hive. New yellow hive. Naming of this may change. Yellow clone hive, as I'm going to be calling it for now, is a split from this yellow hive that last time had a lot of queen cells. Now this hive is technically a duke. Oh, what are all those little things? There's aphids in here. The French toast? How do aphids get in here? They're not mites necessarily because of how they look. I think they're aphids. Probably we got them from leaving our equipment on the ground outside. They don't appear to be on the bottom board. We had a real problem with aphids this year in our garden, but it looks like they are in our hive now too. That's a new pest. 6 or 8 weeks that we've left this hive alone. It looks like it has had a chance to requeen and is laid new brood since. I did not see the queen. I only saw like a total of 5 eggs, but it is going into autumn. She may have slowed down her egg laying for the year. The queens that she rears now usually live about 6 months and will be with her all winter. So maybe if there's like a warm day in November, December, I'll crack this open again to make sure that it's doing okay. You don't want to leave a dying hive alone in your apiary because it only invites pests. As it was, the purple hive that was here previously was overrun by wax moths. Food stores looked fantastic, so it's got plenty for winter. I'll probably still feed it like I have with the other hive over there. So the dilemma we have with yellow clone hive is that it is in a 8-frame box. So with yellow clone hive, we decided to leave this bottom board, even though it's not screened and even though we saw wax moth larvae floating around at the bottom. Primary reason is that we don't want to disrupt the hive too much right now. While I was doing the inspection, a couple of these wasps that are flying around down below me started attacking the hive. So it's a very vulnerable time of year right now, because if we wanted to switch anything in this box, we'd have to pull all the frames out and put it into a 10-frame box in order to get a different bottom on, like the old purple hive bottom on. On top of which, they've already propolized everything, and we would be disrupting that and setting the hive back. And you know, a lot of commercial beekeepers use just the plain bottom board and let the hives do what they want. What I will do is put a super on top of here, but I will leave the lid on without having to open the hive up. We can feed it throughout the winter as we have done here for Forest Hive. I'll have to make a video reviewing the Flow Hive next. I feel like I've gotten enough out of it now to be able to make an assessment about it. How interesting. It looks like the plastic doesn't really quite match up right, and the shape of the cells are a little off. The good news is what is in here does appear all to be capped, because as I've done with all the other hives, it's time to remove the queen excluder in order to give the queen free reign of the entire hive. Last thing we want to do is a repeat of last year when we got to these too late in the year. The weather had cooled dramatically, very quickly, unexpectedly, and the hive had moved up to keep warm and had abandoned the queen down below, I think, and as a result, that hive had no queen going into winter. So it was too late to replace it. All I want to do is just verify that the queen has some brood and that they have a good amount of frames going. We may find that there's just honey on the top deep, and then the brood and everybody will be in the bottom deep. Jump into the middle. Now that we have a better idea of what we're doing, we only really go frame by frame when we're looking for like queen cups or the queen herself. In yellow Flow Hive, I saw no eggs, and more concerning, I saw no brood whatsoever. I didn't see drones either. Oh, there she is. Okay, she's there. All right, I'm putting it back. I'm closing this up quickly. And I don't care that she hasn't left any brood. Maybe this hive is already fully into its winter phase and she's done laying brood for the winter. Another reason why you don't want to leave your autumn inspection so late into the season. Looking good as far as stores go for this hive. Plenty of bee bread, plenty of capped honey. You can tell the difference between honey and brood because capped honey is a little translucent. I don't think I need to feed this hive over the winter. I don't think I need to feed green hive either because it has plenty of stores. That is the biggest advantage of having two deep brood boxes. This particular breed of bees is the Italian bee, I believe. And one of the cons of them, I guess you can call it a con, is that they don't really downsize for winter. I guess because of the healthy population size that yellow is, it is another advantage of the two deep system. Otherwise, the temperament of yellow hive seems great. Even as I was harvesting their honey from the Flow Hive, they were not too upset. I mostly already covered this, but the biggest thing is that we removed the supers, we removed the queen excluder, I also removed the robber screens and put on their reducers for winter. Green hive. Now, during our July inspection, we did not have an opportunity to inspect green hive. So I actually started my inspection this time with this hive doing it first. Green hive was highly propolized, making it super difficult to inspect. When I started to crack it open, I did see a handful of ants. I had previously forgotten to put down the diatomaceous earth around the base of the stand. So between inspections, I went ahead and did that. There were 3 supers on this hive. The uppermost super had very little activity. The next 2 supers were actually full of honey, beautiful capped honey. Because it was a struggle to remove the supers, I brought up a tote to put each frame in individually. And as you can see at the end, how propolized and how much comb there was on the queen excluder, it was essentially glued to the other boxes. Now, I have actually never been able to find the green queen to mark her. She's been a tricky one to locate. Although, even if I did find the queen this late in the year, I still wouldn't mark her because if I accidentally damaged her, it would be too late in the year to replace her. Once I was able to finally get into the brood boxes, also called deeps, and because I had started with green hive, I was fairly concerned that I only saw 1 frame with capped brood and eggs on the top. I wanted to be sure green hive wasn't honeybound and had enough brood to make me feel satisfied. And I risked having the hive open for an extended time in order to determine that the hive was indeed healthy. Overall, I saw a handful of eggs and a little bit of brood and a very healthy laying pattern, which was more than I saw in yellow hive. The rest was just honey, lots of capped honey. All the honey that wasn't capped from green hive, I went ahead and put in front of the apiary so that all of the bees could reclaim that honey back into their hive. That too can attract pests, but at this time of year, I'm more concerned with night creatures like bears and such, and this is inside an electrified fence. Temperament and population. Population was strong. I should also mention that I got stung by green hive. Wait for it. Ouch! 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 Yeah, they got me through the bee suit, but I don't hold that against the girls. I was actually expecting more resistance, and just because of the time of year. Equipment and spacing. We will be leaving green hive with 2 deeps this winter, which means we shouldn't need to feed green hive as we have with the others. So I'm sure I'm overthinking everything. That's kind of the nature of how it goes. I was just sharing with my family that it takes just as much energy, I think, to keep these 4 hives alive as it does probably to keep 40 hives alive. There was a lot to cover in this video. My husband and I were talking about it. It's been a weird year. I'll have some honey to harvest here in the near future. I will make that a separate video. Basically, the hives are sorted for winter. I will wait to see if the weather drops below 50 degrees or 10 degrees Celsius before adding the winter installation. I do need to treat the hives, but that can all be done with our vaporizer. So much covered in this video. If you have watched to the end, oh my gosh, thank you. These journals are more for personal record keeping, but all the same, thanks for watching. So take care for now. Bye.